Getting started. Welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. Um, I do know a lot of folks have been asking us lately, hey, like, are these presentations or webinars going to be recorded? They are. We'll post them on our YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow morning. So if you do want a recording, you can look on our YouTube. You can also go to our website, goparco.com, and go to our resources page, and you'll see the recordings there. You can also shoot us an email, and we'll send you the link so you can view the recording, no problem. So we'll go ahead and get started. For a few, I do see a lot of familiar faces on the webinar tonight, so welcome. And for those of you who are new, these are our presentations. We do these every Wednesday night, covering any topic that could relate to federal employee retirement. My name is John Mantilla. I'm one of the co-founders here and the CEO of Parco. I have my teammate Lauren Fulcher on the line as well. And we work with federal employees and Americans across the country and around the world, helping them plan out their retirements, no matter what stage of their life they're in. So sometimes we work with folks that are just starting out and wanting to make sure that they've put themselves in a solid place for a strong financial future. Then we work with the folks in the middle of their career, wanting to make sure that they're taking full advantage of the benefits available to them. Maybe they've gotten married or they've had a child, and they want to make sure that they're positioned properly with their life change. And then we work a lot with folks nearing the end of their career who want to make sure that as they approach their golden years, that they work so hard for, that they're well set up to not have to stress about all the things that people stress about. So we work with folks across the country and around the world, trying to help them plan this out because we know it can be confusing. And we try to take all the uncertainty and unclarity and really focus it down into easy to digest concepts and topics so that way you feel empowered to do the right thing and to make the right decisions. Ultimately, we're there to help you through every step of the way. And so tonight's presentation, I don't know why that label's from the presentation, um, is covering um, end of year financial housekeeping. And so throughout the presentation, you'll note QR codes in the top right hand corner. You can scan those at any time, and that'll link you right to our portal where you can do a lot of the planning we're talking about tonight, individual situation. Our platform also has like an active to-do list. So the thing it'll basically interpret your situation and your profile and then actively recommend things for you to do to put yourself in a better position. And I'll actually in the chat here right now link to our website. So for those of you who want to check that out while we're presenting, you can do so right through there. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things that we say a lot here at Parco is that federal employees are different. And one of the ways that you guys are different is that you have a lot of benefits through work that regular Americans, other Americans don't have. And so there's different things that you have to consider when trying to make the most of or to optimize these benefits that you have because your employer is the federal government. One of those benefits that you have is your leave. So most Americans now don't have sick leave and annual leave as separate benefits. They have um, what's called PTO or paid time off. Federal employees are one of the few folks now that still have annual leave as an independent benefit from sick leave. And so when it comes to your annual leave, you can accrue this throughout the course of the year. However, there's a maximum amount that you can roll over every year, meaning that as the new year approaches, you can carry forward a certain amount of leave into the new year. That amount that you can roll over every year is 240 hours. So if you have, let's say, 300 hours of annual leave right now, and let's say you moved into 2026 with 300 hours of annual leave, only 240 of those hours would carry over. And this applies to the vast majority of federal employees. There are some special provision employees in certain positions that have exceptions where they can roll over more. But for the vast majority of federal employees, this is the maximum amount that they can roll over annually. Any amount that you don't use or any amount above that 240 is use or lose. Now, what about sick leave? Well, sick leave, you can roll over all of your sick leave. So there's no maximum amount of sick leave that you can roll over. Why some of you might have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. We've had clients that we've worked with that had over 4,000 hours of sick leave as they approached retirement. So sick leave, there's no limit to how much of that you can accrue, whereas annual leave has a different amount. So a good end of year checklist thing is that, let's say that you've got a lot of annual leave, you're not planning to retire at the end of the year, and you're worried about not being able to roll over all of it. Make sure you put in some time to take that time off, to use that annual leave, because any amount over that 240 is use or lose. Now let's talk about TSP and investment and your financial housekeeping. So one of the first things we always like to point out, especially as the end of year approaches, is that there are contribution limits in 2026, and then for 2025, they're substantially the same. But for 2026, I believe it's $31,500. So the end of your financial housekeeping tip for your TSP or for your 401k is that if you have the ability to max out your contributions and you haven't already, you have a few more weeks to do so. So maybe I'm making up an example here, but maybe you've been putting in $500 a pay period. And so you've put in $14,000 so far this year, but you have extra cash that you'd like to put in there, or there's extra amounts you'd like to put in there. Well, you'll have to log into TSP and tell them to change your contribution, or pardon me, go into your payroll, tell them you want to change your contribution amounts and make some big contributions as the end of year approaches, to try to max out that contribution amount, if that's something that you want to do, because there's an annual limit to how much you can contribute to a TSP or to a 401k. Same thing applies to IRAs, just those contribution limits are lower because individual accounts. Also, a lot of folks aren't able to contribute to IRAs because they make too much, because there's that earnings limit, which we've talked about in some previous webinars. Everybody tracking? Okay, great. Another thing we'd recommend when it comes to TSP investments, and we've said this probably 100 times on webinars throughout the years, is that every federal employee should have a Roth IRA open. And Roth IRAs are really powerful because they give you financial flexibility to do something called Roth conversions. They're also really powerful as legacy planning tools, because the money grows inside of Roth, tax-free forever. And then it's tax-free for your beneficiaries for 10 years if they're non-spousal beneficiaries. However, Roth accounts are unique in that they do have a couple specific rules that you have to follow. To access all interest inside of a Roth IRA, you need to have had that account open for 5 or more years, 5 calendar years, and you must be over the age 59 and a half. So why does this matter? Why does this vesting matter? Well, and this is, I think, a really important slide. So let's say that it has to do with how the IRS looks at how long you've had your Roth account open. They basically just look at the calendar year that you opened that account. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you opened your Roth account on January 1st, 2025. Okay. So you open on January 1st, 2025. As of January 1st, 2026, the IRS will say, okay, you've had that account open for 2 years. So you had it for January 1st. So you've had it for all of 2025. And then once midnight on 2026 rolls around, that starts your second year. So you've got 2 years. So you've had that account basically open for 366 days, and you have 2 years of vesting. Well, and this is why it's particularly timely at this date, given that we're near the end of the year. Let's say on the other end, put your account officially as a Roth on the 31st of December. Well, New Year's ball drops in New York, first of the year rolls around, that will mean your second year has vested. So in this case, if you open your account on December 31st, you have that account open for 2 days, but your Roth account now has 2 years worth of vesting. So this is why we always recommend folks open up Roth IRAs as soon as possible, but especially as the end of the year is approaching. If you don't have one open yet, That is an easy checklist item to check, and it's really beneficial because you'll actually kind of like supercharge your vesting because you'll get the same credit as somebody that opened their account in January because of how the vesting requirements work. Now let's talk about your FEGLI and life insurance. So, again, these are kind of like this one of these end of year financial housekeeping that we see with a lot of folks. Now, one of the things that, especially as the holidays are rolling around, maybe work is kind of lightening up just given the more holidays. Um, it's worth thinking about whether or not the life insurance that you have is appropriate. Especially for folks who are approaching retirement. We oftentimes see people consider and actually decide that they don't need as much FEGLI coverage as they have going into the new year or going into their final years of their career. And this can mean a lot of extra dollars in your pocket over the long run. So let's take an example of somebody like option B, Brian. So he's enrolled in FEGLI option B, which is the most expensive of the FEGLI coverages available. He's 57 years old and in good health, and he makes just shy of $60,000 per year. He has 5 multiples of option B coverage. So right now, Brian is paying a lot for this FEGLI option B. If he elects to keep this FEGLI option B, or maybe a better example is, let's say he just doesn't ever consider changing his FEGLI option B, over the next 10 years, he'll pay over $30,000 in premium. Over the next 20 years, he'll pay over $108,000 in premium. Over the next 30 years, again, if he kept it, he'll pay almost as much in premium as he has in. And so, for those of you that are maybe approaching the end of your career, maybe you look at your situation, maybe your kids are older, maybe you're in a better financial spot because you've saved money in the TSP, your house is paid off, all these different things. Uh, Going in here, I don't need to carry all this FEGLI option B coverage. I'm gonna save that money and maybe put that back into my TSP. Now is a great time of year to start thinking about whether or not that's something you would like to do, needs to change. That's something we help folks strategize on every single day. And when you book an appointment with us, that's something we'll review with you. Another end of year checklist item is to use your FSA dollars. So FSA dollars are use or lose. So if you have and you are participating in an FSA, the flexible savings account through your work health insurance, make sure you use those dollars here over the next 3 weeks because they are use or lose. And then, as you start to think about the end of the year, and we'll certainly be doing more of this in the beginning of the year when people do their kind of New Year's resolutions to how to get themselves in shape. But it's always good to think about this in as the holidays approach. Is this can be a really great time to level set, to take a look at your situation, and then think about what you want 2026 and beyond to look like. So think about like what do you want to do or how do you want to live in retirement? Do you want to live the same way you're living now? Are you expecting to live on less? Are you thinking about moving or relocating or being closer to your grandparents? What are your grandparents, your grandkids? What does that look like? How much money will you need? You've saved money in your TSP, you saved money outside, you're going to have a pension, you're going to have your first supplement or social security. How much do you need to have coming in each month or each year to live that lifestyle that you want to live? And are you prepared for some negative event? Do you have the protection that you need if something were to happen to you? Maybe you're getting closer to that retirement red zone, but you're kind of in that risky stage where if, something happens to you, your spouse is going to be in a way worse spot. Making sure that you have all the preparations in place for just in case. And then really importantly is that especially for folks that are approaching retirement, and we've been working with a lot of folks on this lately, is what do you want to do? And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this. For many of you, you've worked for the government for 20, 30, 40 years, and you're used to it's one of the most stable jobs that you can have. And you've likely been at the same agency or been doing a very similar job for a very long time. And when you retire, that regularness changes. And some of the we've never had anybody say they wish they hadn't retired that we've worked with. That actually has never happened. So if you're scared about retirement, we have thousands of folks we've worked with that can all say retirement is great and fun. However, we have noticed a trend with the folks that tend to struggle with retirement in the sense that they're, maybe they start retirement a little flat footed, is they haven't really thought about what they want to do when they're retired. Visualizing, hey, like I'm going to spend my time with my grandkids, or here's how I'm going to stay busy, or I'm going to be out fishing or reading or catching up on some shows I've been meaning to catch up on. Whatever that is, really try to have um, a relationship with that. Try to visualize it because it will make entering retirement a lot easier. And it's something that you can do while you're still working, to make that psychological transition from going from working to retired a lot easier. And so when we think about getting started, there's a lot of things that you have to consider. As every American has to consider income planning, estate planning, investment strategies, RMD planning, all these things. Then on top of that, federal employees have to consider FEGLI, FEHB, their pensions, all these different. And we here at Parco have really built our business and our platform around making that all as easy as possible for you. So you're never having to feel like you're alone to plan these things out. And we sometimes describe it as the angel on your shoulder, looking out for, what you should do to put yourself in the best position to make the best next step. So I know tonight's more tactical in the sense that it was really just trying to look at the main to-do list items to tackle. But I'll stay here open for the Q&A session, to answer any questions that you have, or if suggested end of year financial housekeeping items, please tell us, if you have other ideas. Um, but when we've been working with folks now um, for a long time, and these were the most important things that we would recommend you do as you head into the end of the year. So with that, I'll open things up for questions in the Q&A window. As always, it's a pleasure to present to you all. Let's see. Oh, Christian brings up a really good point. You actually can roll over, um, 600 for 2025. It was $660 of FSA funds every year, um, and it can depend on your employer. So you can roll over some of those funds, but the majority of them are use or lose. Thank you for that, Christian. How is sick leave handled upon retirement? Really good question. So if you retire with sick leave, we probably could have put this slide in the presentation. Um, a good portion of your sick leave will be counted as extra months of service to increase your pension, because it will increase your time in service. Now, I will say, John, that one of the best recommendations we have is that you get a lot more value out of using your sick leave while you're working, retiring with it. So if you have the ability to use your sick leave before, we'd recommend you do so. And this could be, you get an elective surgery that you need to get done, or a medical procedure you need to get done, or maybe you're using your FMLA to take care of a spouse or a family member. You get a lot more value out of using your sick leave while you're working than you do retiring with it. Great question. So, what do you recommend soon to be retirees choose in regards to FEGLI upon retirement? So, I will say the most common, I don't know all of your story, but the most common thing we see is that people will drop their FEGLI option B, and they'll usually at least keep their basic life because the way basic life works is that it's pretty affordable and it becomes free starting at age 65. Then at age 65, the cover so it's free at 65, but the coverage starts to reduce by 2% per month until it gets down to 25% of its value. So most people that we work with say, hey, look, I don't want to be paying for a bunch of life insurance in retirement. And so they tend to elect to reduce it down, especially the option B, but usually they'll keep the basic life. I also, for those of you that have access to GRB, you can also see some sick leave values on there as well. Keep those questions coming. Also, tonight's presentation came about because of some suggestions from past attendees who said, hey, look, if there's stuff that you need to do before the end of the year, I'd love to have a kind of a list of that or to know what that is or us to review that. Are there other topics, or if there are other topics that you'd really like us to cover, put them in the chat window, put them in the Q&A window, and we'll add them to our list. We'll be doing an encore presentation of this of tonight's webinar next week, next Wednesday. But if there are other topics that you'd like, we want to make this valuable for you all. So if it's a deeper dive into sick and annual leave, if it's a New Year's goal setting, whatever the case may be, um, that's 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 why we built this yourself to our clients. All right, I'm going to stick on for just a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions that come through. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I know tonight was a little bit of a shorter presentation than some of the ones we've done in the past, but that doesn't mean it can't be super impactful and tactical. So, with that, I'll let you all go. As always, it's a pleasure to present to you. And thank you all for being here. And we look forward to seeing you all next week during our encore presentation.